Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 45th edition of the Photography Show. I'm Lydia Malamed-Johnson. I'm excited to welcome you today to this interesting conversation about portraiture and fluidity, and the artists will be speaking directly to these with Andrea, but I wanted to say a special thank you for the support of this talk from the Canada Council for the Arts for bringing this program to us alongside Christine Redfern of Elephant, who is showing in the drill hall, and I hope you'll go and see the booth. With that, I'll leave this to you, and please enjoy this conversation.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming here this afternoon to this really very interesting talk. My name is Andrea Kunard. I'm the Senior Curator of Photographs at the National Gallery of Canada, and it's my pleasure to be your host for this afternoon's talk titled Portraiture and Fluidity, featuring the photography of J.J. Levine and Wynne. At a moment of heightened security towards queer and trans lives, J.J. and Wynne's work function both as personal testimony and public counter-narratives. They assert visibility, humanity, and complexity for communities whose stories are often marginalized or contested. So this talk will take shape in the following way, just so everybody knows. I'll let JJ and Wynne introduce themselves. Then we'll let each of the artists present their work and have a talk about it. And then we'll get into a conversation, and hopefully you will have questions for us at the very end. So JJ, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. I will, I have a clicker, that's gonna be useful.
Okay.
So I'm gonna show some work from two different projects. And first I will talk about my queer portraits, which I began in 2006. And it's a series of photographs of my friends and my community in Montreal. And the project really is about love and commemoration of the people in my life. And so each of these portraits is staged in a home environment normally, and they are, very careful compositions. They're shot on medium or large format film, and each setting is really, composed specifically for the image. In this specific portrait, I'm photographing a person who is visiting from out of town, and so this is one of the few images that is not made in the person's actual space, and instead it's in my own space. So in these images, I titled them with the name of the sitter as well as the year that they are taken. In this particular photograph of my friend Miwa, I built the set for the photograph, so I found a different space, and everything that you see in the frame is really intentionally placed there, but even up in this one, I brought all the furniture in. And in each portrait, especially in the images that are not photographed in the house of the actual sitter, I make sure that there's elements that really represent the person, and so there's some furniture that I actually brought from Miwa's space into this set that I created. This is a portrait that I made more recently. So as I mentioned, the project started in 2006, and this image is from this past year. And it's really, it's speaking about queer and trans love and the connection that my sitters have with each other as well as with myself as the photographer. And it's also talking about queer family and the way that we can reimagine our understanding of the word family. This photograph I made in 2015, and it was at a moment when I was about to have a child with my partner at the time, and it felt really important for me to be making an image of this moment in our lives, not just in my couple, but also in our community. As our first child was also the first child in our friend group. And I was keenly aware that making an image of a pregnant trans person had the potential to feel sensational, and I wanted to do it in such a way that was sensitive and that also felt, genuine. And in many of my images, I'm talking about family, different understandings of the word family, and in this specific one, I'm thinking about parenthood and ways of understanding friendship and family and parenthood, outside of a heteronormative framework, but maybe also outside of a homonormative framework. So these two friends of mine are raising a child together, and they are not a romantic couple. And so, thinking about queer family in ways that, make space for different kinds of family structures, outside of a nuclear family. And so, another portrait of a friend of mine with a child. So as you've seen, my series has really shifted over the years, and children are often present in my images now as they're, extremely present in our lives. And so, thinking about, queer people having families, but also, being each other's families. And in this, in this kind of moment in my art practice, I'm really, interested in the way that our relationships have shifted with the arrival of children. And in 2018, I began to include some still lives in my art practice. And this is the first one that I made. It's shot on large format film. And it's, really talking about these kinds of emotional experiences and moments that I find a portrait can't necessarily capture. And so, thinking about the exceptional and the ordinary in our daily lives. And all of my work is very staged. However, some of my images are really, kind of reconstructions of memories. And so this specific image was something that I thought about for a really long time and planned for a while, and kind of came from a moment in my life that I really wanted to recreate for my camera. And something that I, didn't set out to do when I started the project 20 years ago is, revisit the same subjects. And so that's something that has kind of emerged over time. We have these two subjects, friends of mine, who I photograph, many, many years apart, and that's something that's happened, more and more recently, that the people that I'm photographing are people who I've photographed many, many years ago. And so we see my subjects aging and changing over time. And so that's kind of it's like a documentation of our lives and of my friends. And this is the final piece I'll show you from this series. In the series, there's over 150 images, but I just showed you a little selection of them today. And so this photograph was made last year, and it's something that I also, had in my mind for a long time before actually staging it. And I will briefly talk about my alone time project, so changing tracks here. This is the project that is featured in the elephant booth here today and this weekend. In this project, I am photographing one person twice. So there's a single model who is portraying the male and female character in each of these images. And so for me, showing the human capacity to embody different gender presentations, it's a way of, exploring these ideas that I'm thinking about all the time and through my images. And like my other work, they're highly staged and very planned out. And I think, where it shifts is that there's an element of, I don't want to say comedy, but I think that there is something that really engages with the viewer in a very different way. And so, these, I think they're very playful images, and they have the potential to draw people in a way that I think my other portraits could maybe feel a little less accessible. And so in this image, you have one adult and one child portraying the characters of the mother and father and the opposing gender children. And so, of course, the idea that when you have a child, the first question everybody has is like, what is the sex of your child? I as a parent, wanted to, make an image that really talks about that experience and calls into question why is that so important? And I'm gonna wrap this up to make some time for Wynne. But yeah, this is one of the more recent photographs, and yeah, I think something else that's really present in this work is like these relationship dynamics. So the images are very cinematic, but they also they're talking about these kinds of connections between these two characters who are portrayed by the same person. And this final image I'll show you is on display today at AIPAD, and it goes with a 2-channel video installation. Thank you.
Thank you, that's great, AJ. Everybody give him a clap. Very good job. Okay, now we'll hear from Wynne.
Hi, everybody. I'm Wynne Neely. I'm going to take you through one sort of body of work and then 2 areas of my work just touching into self-portraiture and my portraiture in general. Something that was interesting about getting ready for this talk was the way that it sort of had me look at the accumulation of my work. I feel like each time I do some sort of presentation on my work, it allows me to sort of revisit it from a new angle. So that's kind of what this did for me, which I enjoyed seeing my work. Something that you spoke to was seeing how you've repetitively photographed people and seeing them age and having those kind of touch points, which I feel like similarly happens in my work as well. My practice is rooted in portraiture, self-portraiture, and relational image making. I'm really interested in my evolving relationship to portraiture, which includes themes of intimacy, my understanding of my own masculinity, and portrait as collaboration. To me, portraiture is a space of encounter, a space of belonging, and a space of quality time. Ever since I began engaging in portraiture, I've been using it to better understand myself, and I think kind of noticing that in the ways I've put these images together has been kind of like a cool touch point for myself, and being like, yes, that's what I'm doing. The first body of work that I'm gonna talk about is called Have Hold. It's a collaborative project with my best friend Kyle, who's in the room with us today. So yeah, Kyle and I have been best friends for 15 years. We have been photographing each other in some capacity for all of that time. And this project kind of came about at a moment in our lives where we both were really finding ourselves, shifting into adulthood, and really learning who we are, as adults, as trans masculine people engaging in a close friendship together. The intimacy that you see comes from lived history, not something that's constructed necessarily for the camera. Although we are staging this, I think what we've sort of discovered with these images is that they are sort of containers for our intimacy to be expressed and explored together. This image here is showing an installation, so you'll see like the last image kind of central in this one. So this is an example of sort of how we've presented the work in the past. This work to me challenges how masculine intimacy is seen or not seen. We met as butch women in our youth and sort of transitioned in tandem, and so the basis of our intimacy comes from this like upbringing of womanhood to an extent, and I think that care and intimacy is really like reflected in the images that we make together. And sort of like our trans identities complicate how this intimacy is read as well. And to me, this is sort of an unending project. something that I'm noticing a lot with my portrait work is they're kind of all unending because it's sort of how I'm interacting with these people in my life. So they kind of will always evolve and grow with that. This is a more recent one. The images that we currently have span from like 2009 until about 2023 is sort of our last contribution to the work, but it will kind of always be evolving. I'm showing a couple self-portraits here. For me, self-portraits take up a decent amount of my practice, and again, I sort of, in putting these in this presentation, it kind of had me reflect upon the relationship between my self-portrait work and my portrait work. I think for me, that extends and complicates my portrait practice in general. There's sort of a collapse between the distance of like photographer and subject that I enjoy exploring. I think it helps me engage with being on the camera side in a really unique way, the more I kind of push myself into my self-portrait work. And it's a different kind of vulnerability. There's no mediation. I am the person constructing all of it, so it's really kind of become this practice of like sitting with myself. And it's become a space to work through gender, embodiment, visibility. And I think with the way that I portray myself, it's sort of this legitimizing of my trans body, legitimizing of my trans masculinity, and kind of like, I think there's something I can speak to for myself, but I think I commonly, when I imagine myself, I don't think of who I am in this moment. I think of who I was 10, 15 years ago, and it's hard to get beyond that. So self-portraiture has kind of become this way of like reflecting myself back on myself. And I think the key thing too is like, I like to think that I am present in all of my images, whether I am in it or not. So I just showed 2 here, and now I'm gonna show some more, portraits of people in my life and community. The images that I'm showing you, these are portraits of people in my immediate orbit, artists, collaborators, friends, and they all come out of ongoing relationships, not one-time encounters. The work often starts from a desire to spend time with someone, and really it's me wanting to engage in like creating that space of connection with somebody. The photograph becomes a byproduct of that time and that connection space, rather than the sole goal of the encounter. And I think because of that, my images kind of hold a sort of specificity in them because I'm so geared towards making something out of this like intimate engagement with someone. And they're less about representing a type of person and more about a particular type of relationship. And the connection doesn't end when I'm done taking the photos. These are people who I intend to stay connected to, whether the image making was our first time being in a space together, or I've asked to photograph them after some amount of time. I, as an artist, have a commitment to stay engaged with these people, and I think that's a really important piece of my practice. And yeah, because of that, I think it keeps me accountable to my like relational capacity with these people. And I think what I realized too, and I sort of added an extra note here because it kind of came to me as I've been sitting with this, is I'm not showing community that I already have. It's the function of how I build and form community. Like this is sort of my gateway to this sense of belonging. And I've been talking on one photo, so I'm gonna keep showing, sorry. I'll just kind of pause and go through a few. I think the through line for me is portraiture as like a relational and co-authored experience, not exactly extractive. Attention as a form of care, asking what the image gives back to the subject, creating space for recognition and not necessarily definition, and portraiture as a site of possibility. And I think in general, all of this work comes out of being in relation to other people. These images that I make do not exist without those relationships. And the relationships continue to evolve alongside my portrait work with people. So the work isn't fixed, it's ongoing, and it's contingent on these maintained connections. It lives in the space between people, not just in the frame. And I have, again, a commitment to staying in relation with the subject, to the community, and to the act of looking itself. And I think it's overall helped me in understanding the function of my image making, which is around collaboration, belonging, and connection. I'll leave it there to Andrea.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much. Yes, I think so. We have a kind of the slides are going to loop at this point, and hopefully, and people can watch that as well as watching us discuss and having a conversation. So let's talk a little bit about how you set up your shots, how you construct them, because these look very, kind of casual in a way, but they're also very constructed. So I'm interested in how your subjects engage with you during that process, and the kind of equipment you're using, and what that means, how it constructs the space of creativity for you. JJ?
Sure, yeah. So in each portrait, I'm really like setting up a studio, which means I'm bringing in studio lighting, I'm using a tripod, and also what you see within the frame is extremely intentional. So I'm all the furniture, everything on the wall is really like carefully placed. And so when I'm creating this like very staged kind of set, it's in order to really show some elements of the person I'm photographing, but also to make an image that I find satisfying.
Right.
And so I think there is like a kind of consistent aesthetic throughout all my work, and so part of that is the way that I'm building the image, and also like shooting on film and using studio lighting is like another kind of way that the images connect to one another.
And can you tell me a little bit about what the subjects are doing with you at this point? Are they making your life easy, or is it?
So my subjects, who are all my friends across all of my projects, are extremely generous with me. And so my shoots can take anywhere from 4 hours to like several days or weeks, and so. I'm asking so much of my subjects, and at this point in my practice, my friends are so familiar with my process that they, kind of give me carte blanche and let me, do what I want with their space, and also, what they're wearing. Like all these details are things that are really planned and often planned in advance. But of course, there's like spontaneity that happens on set, and so yeah, I think that the people that I'm working with are really. Just like so generous with me and so patient.
That's great. How about you, Wynne?
Yeah, I would say my work functions kind of on the opposite scale of JJ's, which is I tend to leave a lot of room for mystery. Some of it is planned, like I'll talk about an idea that I'm interested in photographing, or I have some sort of maybe it's more of an act or a way of engaging that starts an idea, but what I my shoots look mostly like me talking with the person, you know? Maybe it's like 80% talking, 20% shooting. Maybe also with myself. Yeah, so I like to, you know, this image that we're looking at for a moment here, like this is in their home, and I've found, you know, a place that feels right for them to be in, and we're talking, and we're, you know, like they're very involved in the end product. Maybe not so literally in like the technicalities of photography, but they're involved in sort of like creating the environment for the authentic self to be present.
So when you're working with your subjects, these photographs are not just for them to put up on their wall and that's that.
No.
No, so they're going to be in a public space. And how do you talk about that with them? I mean, they know what an art gallery is, obviously, but you know, their work, the work is for sale. It goes into other people's homes. How does that work with you?
Yeah, I can start there. I think for me, that is something that I have been learning throughout my career. I continue to learn. Each person is different. You know, I photograph some people who I have an incredible collection of photos of them, and they go through periods of not wanting to be seen and not wanting to be represented in that way, and so I have to respect that. Maybe that will change, you know, and I think it's, people know the intention behind being photographed, but that's also where I'm sort of interested in dispelling the power dynamic of taking a photograph of someone and just like having total ownership and agency over that. It can be really complicated. And I think it's sort of an ongoing conversation of like consent and dissemination and how that looks, and each time you do something new with it, it's checking in with these people. Because some people I've photographed, and maybe it's from 10 years ago, and they've transitioned, and they're like, you know what, I don't really feel comfortable with that image of me anymore, and I have to say, yeah, okay, like, we will put it away. So it's being flexible to people's comforts for me.
Right.
Yeah.
How about you, JJ?
Yeah, you know, I think consent is like a really important piece in the way that I work. Even just like it's not a snapshot, it's a photograph that's like very planned out. There's nobody in my images who don't know that they're going to be in the image.
You're right.
And it's quite the opposite. And you know, the first person who's going to see the photograph is after me, is the person who's in it. And there's always, you know, like as Wynne was saying, space to kind of rescind that consent. And I want the people who are in my images to be happy with the end result, and that's really important for me. And so, you know, when I'm making an image, that it's very clear to the people who I'm photographing what the intention is, where it will go, and something that I've found really satisfying is when I have an exhibit. So often the people who are in my images are present.
Oh, that's great.
And yeah, so like I think, you know, that speaks to, you know, the fact that my friends are really often really happy to be in my images.
Yeah. So the way you're talking about all of this is that the portraiture is kind of a process. It's a constant process for people who get their photograph taken, see themselves perhaps differently at another point in time, have to come back to you engage with them again. So it goes back and forth. So it's interesting because like a lot of portraiture, the idea is that, oh, well, we can represent ourselves in this image, and this is who we are, and somehow that's who we are forever. And it's your style is both of you have a very what could be called straight style. And how do you see the kind of the queer aesthetic challenging that, and how do you use it for yourself?
Yeah, I can start if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that at least like the way that I work, it's really it's like very traditional, you know, it's what you were saying. And I think that it's intentional for me to be like referencing kind of like early portrait photography and these kinds of like, you know, late 19th century, early 20th century portraits that like exist in this kind of archive, you know, and I think that the way I'm working is like so parallel to that. And obviously my subject matter is so different from that. And of course, queer and trans people have always existed. And, but I think, our lives haven't always been represented in this way or by people who, who identify with the subjects. And so, for me, making this like huge archive of images of the people in my life, it's a way of like celebrating and commemorating these relationships, but it's also, like I put so much time and care into each portrait that I'm making, and I think for me that's like, a way of like conferring importance into my subjects.
How about you, Wynne?
Yeah, it just makes me think about, is the queerness in the act of photographing, is the queerness because I'm taking the photo, is the queerness because the subject is there? I think it can be any and all of the above. Parallel to my portrait work, I also do sort of like kind of still life observational work as well. And I often pair those with portraits because I find that I sort of give attention to these sort of observational moments in the same way I give attention to portraiture. So yeah, it's like I've been like educated on this sort of straight portrait style, and I think like starting from that point and just like queering it in all of the ways, subject matter, viewpoint. For me, a lot of it is like the energy that is being cultivated in that space. So like all of the queering of the straight image kind of happens all over the place for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's really an important element of the work. And I just want to ask you another question about like so-called historical styles. Are these like documents of works, or do they have a good dose of fiction, and which is, a factor in all photography? Because I'm also thinking, do the subjects see themselves in some kind of, for lack of a better term, activist way, or that they're representing something that's bigger than themselves? So do you see that kind of dynamic at play in your work?
I mean, I think I really shy away from the interpretation that my work represents like a broader community. I think I'm really like trying to talk about my specific relationships, and there are obviously like gender and sexuality is like an important element in my images, but it's also like an important. It's important to me as who I am and my identity, and many of my subjects as well. But yeah, I think that like those dynamics are really important.
Can you repeat?
Well, what I'm talking about is like, do you see these as statements of some type for the trans community?
Yeah, I think earlier in my work, I felt the weight of that on my shoulders, like I had to do that work, and as like a white, cis-passing masculine person, there's just no way that I could properly represent an entire community. So I think kind of the point of what I am coming to today is realizing like, really the work is about me. It's about my connection to these people, and it's like, it's not so much a document, but maybe, yeah, I don't know exactly the words that I'm trying to get to, but documenting doesn't land exactly for me.
Right.
Because I'm really focused about the space of the portrait being taken as much as the end result of the final image.
Right. Yes, again, so much of this is process of like...
Process heavy.
Yes, and acting out for the camera in certain ways, and the theatricality of the photographic space and how that allows you to engage in those kinds of activities. Like when you were saying, like you put yourself in your images a lot, JJ, how about you? Do you feel that you put yourself in, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm present in some of my images, and as Wynne said, I'm present in all of my images.
Yes.
In one way or another. But yeah, self-portraiture definitely is not something that I have felt that comfortable doing, and it's very, very early on in my studies, I received feedback that I should include myself in my images, and that didn't feel necessarily like something that that was intuitive for me. But I took that feedback, and I think that I have probably made like a dozen images of myself over the years and like through different projects, and I think in the context of like the broader context of my work, I think it is important to be like physically present in my images. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to add anything, Wynne, or just?
Yeah, I just think like there's a body of work that I'm sort of leading into making currently that solely is me being present in every photo with another person. And that to me, I'm really interested in sort of blurring the line between subject and photographer, and how I can sort of like hold both spaces. It's going to be difficult, but I'm interested in sort of crossing over in that way. So yeah, I think portraiture and self-portraiture can be such broad terms, and I'm interested in sort of like expanding my understanding of those two things and blending those worlds.
Oh, thank you. We can leave a bit of time here if there are questions from the audience. Does anybody? Yes.
Hi, I'm Tom, and thank you both for showing us your work. I'm interested that you're committed to this over a long period of time. Hello, I'll start again. Hi, I'm Tom. Thank you for showing us your work. I think it's important that you've both worked on these series over a period of time, and hopefully you'll continue doing that. It'll evolve into other variations, but thematically it'll stay. JJ, you said you shoot with film, so you're not using the digital camera. All right, so that means you don't get to show your subjects a picture after you take it with the LCD on the camera.
Exactly.
All right, so, and Wynne, do you use a digital camera?
I use many formats. Yeah, I like to stay in film as much as I can, but also my work contains digital images.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, and JJ, do you ever shoot digital?
No.
All right, so I find that there's a big difference in the way you interact with your subject if you can show them the image
For sure.
right after you take it. because-
Well, I don't do that,
Oh, you
ever.
don't? Okay.
Yeah.
And they never ask?
Oh, they ask and I say no, yeah.
Well, that's not very polite.
Yeah, it's intentional. People are very critical of themselves.
Yes, they are.
And I work very hard to create a space of trust, and I ask for that trust. And yeah, so I don't show images until I am ready to.
Okay, interesting.
And when I started making my images, what I would show was a contact sheet that I would make in the darkroom.
Yes.
And so, of course, there's like a few days or a week between when I get my film processed and when I can go to the darkroom to make a contact sheet. And at this point in my practice, I scan my negatives, so I'm able to show my subjects like a digital file of the either 10, 15, sometimes 20 exposures. Since I'm shooting medium format film, it's not I don't have like 2,500 exposures to go through. It's really like a very limited number, and of course with large format, it's like 2 or 3 sheets of film.
All right, thank you very much.
Is there another question? Nope, there's somebody in the back over there.
Hi, I was just wondering how you feel like your work has progressed through the different series, and what you've learned from shooting like the same subjects over and over again, how you feel like you've grown, and yeah, thank you.
Whoever wants to go.
I
Sure.
I think that the way that I work has shifted over the years, and I'm more careful than I was at the beginning. And also, the fact that I'm shooting on film means that for a very, very long time, until pretty recently, I was printing everything in the darkroom, which meant there was actually like no room at all for any kind of, post-production or manipulation of my images afterwards. So, if there is like a plug that is amiss, that's like, it's gonna be there in the image. And so that kind of taught me to be really, really careful when I was shooting. And because film is expensive and I'm putting so much time and energy into each photograph, it has meant that over the years have just become more conscious of every single element of the image. And I think, I've always put a lot of care into images, but I think that has just kind of become more and more honed over the years.
I think for me, two things, like technically speaking, because I do shoot some digital, I'd say like half of my practice because it's so expensive, or film is so expensive. When I want to shoot film, it's because I want to stay within this really like slow, intentional process of not shooting like digital garbage for the sake of just firing off a lot of images. And I think early on in my practice, that maybe was like a crutch to lean on, maybe because I was young, uncomfortable holding space with another person, uncomfortable trying to like run the show of the portrait setting. And I think when I look at my work, I can see and feel the ease with which I'm able to get to the place I want now in my images. And I think also when I look at sort of my archive of work and the progression over the years, what I really see is the amount of people who continually trust me, who give me their trust, who let me see them in the ways that I want to. And that's really big to witness, yeah.
There's a question over here.
So, JJ, I think your use of color is absolutely extraordinary. And I just wondered how you think about it, and how much you think about it, because it's, to me, a huge element of the pictures.
Thank you. So I think so much about color, and I'm so drawn to color photography. And I think that, it's not just color, but also like texture and pattern and motifs that come up over and over again in my images. And I think there is just like an aesthetic sensibility that I'm like really, really, really drawn to, and I want to capture in my images. And, from a technical perspective, I use like a specific film stock and specific lighting in order to be able to really like capture the vivid colors that exist in my images. And as certain film stocks have become obsolete, I've had to like do many, many tests to find a way to really continue to have a kind of a similar aesthetic. And a lot of my my earlier alone time photographs are shot on slide film, which means that the colors are even more saturated. And so, trying to kind of recreate that using the film stock that I have available to me now.
Do you digitally jiggle the colors, fix
No, not at all. And so, in this project, of course, there's like this digital intervention where I'm scanning and layering different negatives in order to have, the same person portraying multiple characters in the same image. But for me, it's really important that the digital manipulation kind of ends there, that it really is a collage and a composite of different negatives, but that, the colors, but also, the way that the person's body looks in the image is really, it all happens in the studio with wigs, makeup, prosthetics, adding hair, removing hair. And so there's no aspect of the people's, traits or like gender presentation that's digitally altered. It's really just like in the studio. And same with the colors. They're all kind of, what you see in the image is what was in the studio. And sometimes I'll paint a wall or I'll paint a piece of furniture in order to really like get the colors that I want from the image.
So I have a question about trust, because which has been like a subject I feel has been talking about that you guys have been talking about a lot. what about like the trust or mistrust of an audience, of an outside audience? Like, I feel like if I were to photograph my friends, I would feel so protective of them and how other people view them, or people who might not understand queerness or transness. Has that been an experience? Or like, how do you deal with that maybe like mistrust or protectiveness of your subjects if you're not showing them in maybe a safe space or a space where there are queer people who understand the lives that, you know, your friends are living, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And I think no matter who is being photographed, it is a really vulnerable experience. And there's something very vulnerable about having your own image out in the world. And of course, when it comes to marginalized communities, that is like, you know, tenfold. And I think that, yeah, for sure, for me, I have to trust that the audiences are not going to be hostile towards my subjects. And I think like as the political climate shifts, that feels like harder and harder. And yeah, I think that like I don't know if like luck is the right word, but I feel like I've so far I haven't encountered like a, you know, really kind of negative responses to my images, but definitely like it's like frightening to put images in the world that could be making my friends and people that I love like more subject to scrutiny.
Yeah, put you in.
Yeah, I mean, it happens, but I don't know if I would use the word like hostile in sort of feedback that I've gotten, but definitely there are people who don't understand or feel threatened by, I'm thinking particularly when Kyle and I showed this work, like this woman came up to us and was like, oh, I was like feeling really like, this made me feel weird, like what am I witnessing, like what's happening here? And I'm like, yes, that's the point, isn't it? Like, interesting, something is being stirred up in you. And I think anything hostile that I've gotten has been people on the internet behind a screen. And I went through a big wave of that maybe 10 years ago, and that I think was a big lesson of, I'm just not gonna look. I'm just not gonna engage. Yeah, I think it's a risk, but artists have to make risks, you know? So yeah, I think it's sort of like a reflection of, I don't know if you find this, but maybe it's like a reflection of just what queer people commonly see. Like there's always that risk of scrutiny, you know?
But also like, yeah, like the burden of representation,
Yeah.
you know, like, and I think that there's been moments for me when I question whether or not it's okay to be like putting these images out into the world. And then every once in a while I, you know, receive feedback that, like just very recently, like last week, I was told that there was like a student tour of an exhibit that I have in a museum in Quebec right now, and that there was a student present who had just come out to their family and it had gone very badly, and they'd kind of like gone back into the closet, and it had been this like very difficult thing, and that their like high school class went to my exhibit, and because of it, they came out to their whole class, and that they had like this very warm reception. And for me, like those kinds of anecdotes are like so moving to me and make me feel like there's a purpose to what I'm doing. And yeah, I really like, I hope that my images are having some kind of positive impact. And yeah, I guess those kinds of moments make it feel worth it.
I think too, I don't know if you find, but the positive feedback exponentially outweighs the negative feedback. So that's what I find with, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Oh, more.
Thanks. This is a follow-up to what you were just talking about. Do you ask your, I'm going to say models, but your subjects, for a model release or written permission to exhibit their photos and or sell them? And if you sell them, do you compensate your models?
Well, great question. Yeah, it's something I think about a lot. actually. I have model releases with the people who I photograph, who are definitely like, people who are in my immediate circle. I feel like we have enough of a agreement together that it sort of like stays, and if it needs to be shown, things are put into place to have that agreement there. In terms of compensation, that is not something that I have had to deal with yet. But it's something I think about a lot in removing the power dynamic of me being the photographer. And I sort of think to myself, it feels only right for me in these settings to compensate and share with the people who I'm photographing because they are an equal contributor to this body of work. So I don't exactly have an answer for you, but it's something I'm always considering and thinking about as I make work and as my career progresses. Yeah.
So the last part of your question about compensating models, no, I don't compensate my models when I sell photographs of them. In terms of model releases, it's something that I never did, for the first 10 years of my art practice. And in 2015, I made a book, and for insurance reasons, I had to get model releases. And so it's this very daunting process because there's around 100. I had to contact 100 people that I photographed for the course of 10 years. And
we learn through mistakes,
yeah,
don't we?
But I mean, and I had really, in the past, I'd known about model releases, and really I didn't want to use them because I wanted my subjects to be able to rescind consent at any moment. So it was, this kind of interesting process of having to reach out to people. Most of the people I photograph are still in my life, but some of them aren't. And so, having to reach out to people I hadn't spoken to in a really long time, it ended up being this very amazing experience to reconnect with people. And yeah, I think that, of course, it's a legal document, but if anybody doesn't want me to show a photograph of them, I won't.
I'm just curious, when you're talking about consent and then you said rescind consent, since you're already at the Park Avenue Armory and you're doing books, how does that work?
So when I have an exhibit, I tell the people who are going to have their image on the wall that exhibit is happening, and they have an opportunity to tell me if they don't want that, and it hasn't happened. But
Oh, okay.
But if
the picture sells and stuff, and then it just...
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's when I have an exhibit, that's an opportunity for somebody to not have their photograph.
By the way,
shown,
I loved your in the booth, and then one of them was a living one, or it was
the film,
a video,
the
right,
video installation.
Which was, delightful.
But I think also, the fact that the people who are in the images are so often at the exhibits and, bring all their friends and are so excited to, to pose next to their photograph that, that tells you a little bit about, how the people in my images are, are feeling about their portraits.
I'm also a portrait photographer. I photograph models. I pay them. Model, pose, $1, and then that's the compensation.
Yeah, I think for me, it's I don't necessarily think of the people in my images as models so much as subjects, and so I think that power dynamic is really different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to have a comment about the consent. For example, there's something that in photography has not been considered, which is the, I wouldn't say spontaneous, but the implicit consent. For example, some people, and I did, take photos of you, and I never asked your consent. So, am I in trouble? You see, the thing is, there's a lot of myths about, certain things in photography. When, if I am a street photographer, and I see some, relation or something that is very important to photograph, and these people disappeared, because it was a moment that I captured. You see, the consent became, nonsense. And I think we have to think in photography about the issue of consent, because sometimes that becomes a legal problem. And I don't think we have thought enough about the issue of consent, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think that there's, it's like an important philosophical question about, like, taking photographs of strangers. And yeah, I think that there is this like really intense history of people making images of like marginalized folks. And I think that like power dynamic is the most important element, right? Like, why is somebody making the image that they're making, and how is it going to be received? And I think that's true, like, regardless of whether the person is consenting. But at least for me, like in my images, I think that power dynamic is really present. And I like to think that there is like a kind of shift in that power, and that the people in the images are, of course, they have control of the fact that they were sitting there while the photograph was taken, but also the way that they're interacting with the audience or the public is, I think, like a kind of a way of like turning that on its head.
Yeah, I mean, consent is a huge topic, so
I was going to say,
don't
like,
wanna
we
get
live in an age where we lack consent constantly.
Exactly.
We're being recorded every moment of every day on every street corner. So the topic of consent, when you bring it into a very like intentional photographic process, it's very different.
Very different, yeah. And I'm not quite sure where we are in terms of time, but we have to cut.
We are done.
I'm sorry. That's it. But thank you all very much for coming. Thank you for your great questions.